Hello, and welcome to a virtual visit to Rancho Obi-Wan. The real Rancho Obi-Wan is a nonprofit museum in Northern California, about an hour from San Francisco. I'm going to put this down here. And it is the repository of the Guinness World Record largest collection of Star Wars memorabilia. We've got about a total of 400,000 pieces in the collection. So we're going to start with the first slide. Do I click on to get the first? There we go. This is the gate to Rancho Obi-Wan. You can see there's an Obi-Wan in the middle there. Neighbors originally thought that perhaps we were opening a monastery, and this was a monk. But we said, did you ever see Star Wars? So there we go. There we go. Okay, now we got it. Pressing the wrong button. This is the outside to Rancho Obi-Wan. These were former chicken barns, where up until the early 1970s, there were about 20,000 egg-laying hens. And this is the entrance. At the top of the stairs, a bust of Obi-Wan done by the very talented sculptor Lawrence Noble. And the library at Rancho Obi-Wan. The hallway leading to the main part of the museum with all of the theatrical movie posters for the original trilogy. And this is the way it looked back in 1998. So we're at the 20th anniversary of Rancho Obi-Wan. And when I took over the property, there were no walls, no ceiling, no insulation, nothing. But all I saw was the empty space that we could have. And this is the way it looks today. This is the Tower of Action Figures, and the tower was originally built by Target. We did a show for Target on the opening of The Force Awakens down in Los Angeles, and they wanted to display my collection of all of the action figures mint on the cards, and came up with this idea of doing a tower. The action figures are really the core of a lot of collections of Star Wars, and what started me out in collecting Star Wars back in the day. The Bith musicians are audio animatronic. They actually move and dance and play music, and they're from FAO Schwartz, the toy store that went bankrupt about 10 years ago. These were in Las Vegas at their store in the Caesars Palace Mall. The Darth Vader costume is partially screen used and partially an appearance costume. The mask and helmet were screen used in Return of the Jedi. The leather suit, the woolen undercape, and the codpiece were all screen used in the original Star Wars movie. Down below, we've got some stormtrooper boots, molds for the Darth Vader helmet. And on the other side, we have Boba Fett and Han Solo and Carbonite from replica companies. They're going back about 20 years. Cantina creature masks for stormtroopers. The letters that you see on the wall in the back are from the Loew's Orpheum Theater in New York City on opening day. And when the letters came down, they went to a friend of the manager's, and he kept them in his son's bedroom on the wall until his son went off to college, and then he put a small ad in Antique Toy World, and I bought them up. These are giant Lego pieces. The Darth Vader and the Boba Fett were both sold by FAO Schwartz, and the R2-D2 was a display at FAO. This is a kid's bedroom from 1983, or at least our version of a kid's bedroom from 1983. And so it's filled with toys and sheets and pillowcases, wallpaper, bootleg lamps, underoos, one of my favorite pieces, the Palatoy British Death Star, Super 8 movies, music, and Return of the Jedi bicycle. And this is our Focus collection, a little tribute to our favorite new droid, BB-8. This is the entrance to the back section of the museum. It's the Tantive 4 corridor, and it was built by the R2-D2 builders for Celebration 4 as a photo backdrop. And we used it to connect the two sections of the museum. Here you see the other side with R2, 3PO, and the holographic chess table. The arcade, and a giant Darth Vader head that was at Toys R Us in the Midtown Manhattan store. They called Lucasfilm in 2008 and said, "We're getting rid of it for the Clone Wars, and would you like it?" And Lucasfilm Licensing said, "No, not interested." Somebody said, "Ask Steve if he wants it." And I had seen it, but in my memory it was about 4 feet tall and made of foam core, when actually it's about 8 feet tall. It's made of wood and steel and weighs over 800 pounds. So it was free, but getting it to the north coast of California cost about $5,000. This is my very first Star Wars collectible. It's a bid booklet, or a color brochure that was sent to movie theaters in order to get them to run Star Wars. And it came to my office at the Wall Street Journal in Los Angeles and went to the guy who covered the movie business. And he looked through it and threw it away. So when he left for the day, I did my first dumpster diving for Star Wars. And there it is, still. The Chewbacca mug was one of the early licensed items from California Originals, sculpted by a guy named Jim Rumpf. And it was one of the things that George talked about when I interviewed him for my first book. He said, there were only 2 pieces that I really thought about as far as licensing when I was writing the script. And one was Chewbacca as a mug, because Chewbacca was based on his dog, Indiana, and dog breed mugs were and still are popular. And the other piece was an R2-D2 cookie jar, because R2-D2 was a barrel shape. This is how to make evil look cute. These figures were sculpted by a friend of mine in the UK, and they're based on some photos we have from Kenner of the original Kit Bash figures that they showed to Lucasfilm and said, this is what the action figures are going to look like. A prototype of something called Star Tots. This was going to be, these are replicas, and this was going to be a preschool line that Kenner came up with in 1979 and never went ahead with. And the famous vinyl cape Jawa mint on the card. I replaced all my original 12 action figures back in the day, because I had opened them all. And the guy I bought them from said, oh, you know, I've got this variation. This is way before the internet, way before I heard the word variation. And he said, it's a different kind of Jawa. And I looked at it and said, well, that looks really cheap. I said, how much do you want for it? And he said, I have to get $45 for it. And I said, that's ridiculous, 45? You know, these things are worth at most 10 bucks. So I said, I'll pass, and went out to my car, started to put the key in the door, and the force must have stopped me. And I went back and said, okay, I'll buy that. overpriced vinyl Cape Jawa. Of course, now these things are going mint on the card for $2,000 and up. So I've made some really smart decisions, and I've made some really stupid decisions. But that's the nature of collecting. Now, this is from Italy, and you're either buying an Ewok with glue sticks or glue sticks with an Ewok. I was never quite sure what you were buying. And in Spain, you could get Colgate dental cream with an action figure. Unfortunately for Colgate, this is an action figure of the character Bib Fortuna with the worst teeth in the entire Star Wars original trilogy. I'm not sure how good a salesman he was for dental cream. This is a store window display of Hungarian bootleg action figures. Bootlegs, as you know, have become very, very hot in the Star Wars collecting community. And these are actual characters from the Mos Espa arena. They built miniature sets of the arena and hand-painted 200,000 Q-tips, put them in brass mesh, and then blew air underneath. So in the high shots, it looked like 100,000 to 200,000 heads were moving when they were actually these painted Q-tips. This is Obi-Wan Sansweet. I had my head scanned by Gentle Giant in Australia when they were doing the scans of the actors for Episode 2. And this is probably the rarest and most valuable of the toys in the collection, both versions of the rocket-firing Boba Fett, the unpainted 4-sided missile version and the painted 8-sided missile version. They kept working on it even though there were product safety issues to see if they could have some sort of a locking mechanism, which is why they continued to do it. And the problem was not the locking mechanism, the problem was the size of the missile. Here we have a Revenge of the Jedi card proof. There are about 50 different ones that are in circulation. And as I mentioned before, one of my favorite pieces, this is the cardboard Death Star from Palatoy in England. It was also sold in France, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and that's it, Canada. Now, sometimes products in the early days went out without final approval. And one thing George Lucas said was, don't slap the Star Wars name on a piece of crap. Well, they didn't hear him in Canada, and so we got the Darth Vader utility belt, not only Vader, but Luke and Leia. And as soon as Lucasfilm saw the product samples, they said, stop selling them. This is the giant, nearly 7-foot-tall Lego Darth Vader from FAO Schwartz. This is the Vader reveal. This is about 20 years old from Elusive Concepts. And Ralph McQuarrie based Vader partly on a samurai. So we come full circle with the oldest doll company in Japan, Yoshitoku, which made this incredible quarter-scale Vader samurai, more than 900 hand-assembled pieces. And a Darth Vader motorcycle jacket from Japan with the helmet. Of course, we go from the wonderful to the ridiculous. This is a Darth Vader boxing puppet from Tijuana, and a Darth Vader egg cup from the UK. This was the cover of the Star Wars Weekly, the Return of the Jedi Weekly in the UK around Christmas time. And the present to Han says, from Uncle Darth. Everyone needs a Darth Vader popcorn stand. This was a premium from Japan for Episode 1. So Pepsi was the sponsor, And there are battle droids and a carrying case, and you could freeze a block of ice in here and take a 10-pack of Pepsi to a picnic, and it only weighed about 40 pounds. Very, very handy. And the Pepsi R2D2 dispenser was another premium from Pepsi Japan. Beautiful engraved glasses from Japan. Now, Lucasfilm does not allow anything Star Wars and alcohol or tobacco. But that didn't stop the Australian fan club from doing Mos Eisley Space Port. Here we have from Japan a whole selection of snacks, Slim Sticks, rice snacks, candy, and they all had little premiums inside. So bookmarks and little boxes and small figures. Frankenberry. Who remembers Frankenberry? Yay, Frankenberry. Some of the early cereals where you can get Star Wars stickers or cards were very colorful. This is, before it totally fell apart, this was a celebration cake from the UK, a Darth Vader cake. That was black icing, and it tasted as nice as it looks. Now, if you eat a celebration cake, you obviously are going to have problems with your teeth. This is from a dentist friend of mine in Mexico. Actually, he's here today, so if you want to see him for an appointment to get Star Wars caps on your teeth, just ask for Jorge. Promotion for French chicken. In fact, I bought so much of this during a convention in France to get the magnets that they called me Monsieur Poulet, Mr. Chicken. And then I had to empty all of the packages in the hotel room, and I'm sure when the cleaning lady came in, it looked like waste cans filled with human flesh. It was pretty disgusting. Fan-made cream of Jawa soup. I don't know what this tastes like. Star Wars dog chow from Australia. Collect one of 12 character stickers. Of course, you didn't know what was going to be in the bag, so you had to buy a 4-year supply of dog food in order to get all 12 stickers, if you were lucky. This is one of my favorite pieces. This is a Chewbacca hand puppet from Canada. Very rare. And this is from a young lady who runs something called House of Mouse in the Netherlands. Many Wookiees died to bring you this cell phone case in the UK. And here we have a Friendly Wampa prototype from 1995, never produced. Prop Store, which is here, has a booth. Put together this display of Ewok fur. So it's really acrylic material, and all this was used to make the Ewok costumes for Return of the Jedi. And this is me as an Ewok, one of the larger Ewoks in captivity. The mask was put together from objects that were at Stuart Freeborn, the creature maker's home workshop. And so the mask is virtually like a background mask for the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi. The rest of the costume was made by a costume maker in Los Angeles. And I wore this at the beginning of Celebration 4 because I have no shame whatsoever. Now, the Ewoks got some really bad press because they were supposedly George's idea of redoing teddy bears. So when the ILM started doing the Ewok movies, they came up with this T-shirt. Damn right we're cute. Guns blazing, bombs ready to fall. This is an Ewok pony from the Tournament of Roses Parade float. We did two floats in 2007 for the Star Wars Spectacular. One was Endor and one was Naboo, and this was the Ewok pony. Jar Jar Binks. You know, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of Episode 1 and Jar Jar Binks. So you can imagine all of the new Jar Jar Binks merchandise that is going to be coming out, flooding the stores. I lie, of course. This is the Jar Jar Binks where you squeeze his stomach and the tongue pops out. And this could be the worst licensed item ever in the history of Star Wars licensing. The Jar Jar Binks Monster Mouth Candy Tongue. You press on the back, and the candy tongue slowly comes out. It's filled with bumps. And so you suck, never mind, I don't have to go into detail. I walked into the head of licensing and said, how could you license something like this? I said, it's just gross and disgusting. He said, well, that's what kids like, gross and disgusting. And I said, yeah, but not something they should learn about in hygiene class in the 10th grade. This is a chocolate Jar Jar Easter bunny from Canada from the year 2000. And I don't know what kind of preservatives are in it, but it's still in excellent shape. It could be because they're scared of Jar Jar. A Jar Jar silk robe from Australia. Now we get to nicer characters. This is one of the original Yoda caps from the Thinking Cap Company in 1980. And the very first sculpture that was licensed for Lucasfilm was a Yoda sculpture for The Empire Strikes Back, the 10th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back. And it was through Killian Enterprises. It was done by Lawrence Noble and sold through the fan club. And then we get to the Yoda, which is outside of Skywalker Ranch, the Presidio in San Francisco, the Singapore headquarters of Lucasfilm, and Imagination Park in San Anselmo, where George lives. Also one at Rancho Obi-Wan. 4 friends and I commissioned Lawrence Noble to do this great piece, and 20 of them were actually sold to the public. Now this could be the ugliest Yoda ever made, and this is in German paper. So we have German paper towels and German facial tissues and German toilet paper. And the Yoda doll is there because they wanted to do Yoda-themed toilet paper with Yoda on each sheet of toilet paper, and they had already worked out the advertising slogan, "Wipe out the dark side." And for some reason, my boss, the head of marketing, decided, no, I don't think so. So we got the ugly Yoda doll instead. These are the Happy Hippos, and they are from Kinder Eggs in Austria and Germany. And the Happy Hippo was their sort of advertising character, and they dressed them in Star Wars costumes. So they're not Star Wars characters, but they're Happy Hippos as Star Wars characters. This is a 501st Legion quilt with patches from all over the world. This is another one of my favorite pieces. It's sort of folk art. Somebody found this for me at a flea market, and my assumption is that somebody's dad couldn't afford an AT-AT, which was fairly expensive even when they first came out, went into the wood shop and managed to make this wonderful folk art piece. This Millennium Falcon is made of tin plate and was made by a craftsman in Mexico. And I have about 15 or 20 of his vehicles. Everyone needs an R2 trash can and an R5 toilet brush holder, also fan-made. This R2 sculpture was won the craft contest in Mexico City, and it was put together by a craftsman there. This is from Canada, from the backwoods of Canada, a 3-foot tall chainsaw and chisel C-3PO. And another C-3PO. This must have hurt when you yanked his tape, but what are you going to do? This is from a line of Sigma ceramics from the early 1980s. Now we have Han in carbonite, but we also have a frog in carbonite, and from a company called Frog Design. We have Jar Jar in carbonite, and second down you can see George Lucas in carbonite. Poor George. And a George Lucas Fandango puppet. We used this in an internal company film, and this is won first prize in the piñata category at a 2004 Mexican Star Wars convention. So amazing. Piñatas are not just to bang apart and get the candy out of, but you can see some amazing craftsmanship. And as a follow-up by the same guy, this is a Luke on the Tauntaun piñata. This is a crew uniform from Hoth, or Norway, from Finst, Norway, where they filmed all of the Hoth scenes. And a Blue Harvest rain jacket. And most of you know that they filmed Blue Harvest in the US under the title Blue Harvest Horror Beyond Imagination to try to keep the media and the fans away. And this was when they filmed Blue Harvest or Jedi up in Northern California in a rainforest for the Endor scenes. Somehow I ended up with Forlom's crotch. I don't know. Long story. Forlom was actually named by ILM. It stands for the love of money. And this is a foot cast from one of the stunt guys on Jedi, Paul Weston. And Paul was the driver of Jabba's sail skiff. And Paul was doing a stunt where he got into a fight with Billy D. Williams' stunt double, and the harness on the stunt double broke, and he landed on Paul's foot and broke it. And so he kept this cast for a long time because it says Sarlacc 1, Stuntman 5, Mark Hamill, What and Give Up Show Business, Your Loving Nurse, Day Shift, Carrie Fisher, Kenny Baker wrote Break a Leg, somebody else wrote Plastered Again. The last remains of Qui-Gon Jinn. I was on the set of episode 1 when they burned the wax effigy of Qui-Gon, and they actually used the Qui-Gon costume. And the gas flames came up, they burned the costume, George called cut, 2 guys came in with fire extinguishers and then took the wax dummy out the rear of the set in case they needed to use it again. It didn't melt. And the set broke about 5 minutes later. I went out front. I mean, everybody else went out front. I followed the trail out back and found a very wet pile of burnt cloak, pieces of the belt, the boot, and a food pellet. And I rescued the last remains of Qui-Gon Jinn. This is a bracelet and a ring and a pin from Neiman Marcus. And Yves Saint Laurent cosmetics that nobody ever saw in a store and nobody ever bought, but it was a very nice store display. And a Swarovski crystal jeweled purse that sold for originally $2,300 at FAO Schwartz. Why FAO was selling jeweled purses, I don't know, but maybe that's one of the reasons they went bankrupt. Everybody likes Princess Leia underoos. Underwear that's fun to wear. These are high-end porcelain dolls of Queen Amidala. And this is fan-made Barbie dolls. This is Amidala and her handmaidens go Vegas. Madame Alexander dolls of Luke, Leia, and Han. The problem with these dolls is if they start blinking, they never stop. And bowling balls. Oh yes, gotta have Star Wars bowling balls. They did 7 different bowling balls, one for each of the 6 trilogy movies and a pink one for the little ladies. Now this is pretty cool. This is a Japanese stormtrooper golf bag. Now, Marin County always had the reputation of being laid back. So this was the Star Wars Marin County unit. Darth Vader in a hot tub, smoking something, drinking a little bubbly, and the back of the shirt says, "The Empire lays back." This is a costume hand of C-3PO from Return of the Jedi. A very hard vinyl, very difficult to move the hand. When he had to move his fingers, they had to shoot it with a hot air gun. And he got a little flexibility for about a minute in the hot air gun. Pieces of the Death Star from the original movie, including a motion control gun tower and a hand-painted cardboard gun tower. This is the original door from the Mos Eisley Cantina. And a friend of mine who's an archaeologist went on an expedition to Tunisia in 1997 and met the guy who rented the building to the production and said, "You know, do you have anything left? Are there any props or costumes or anything like that they left?" And the guy said, "No, that was 20 years ago." My friend David said, "Oh, okay, well," and he just started looking around the town, and he spotted this door. The paint was off of it, and the guy was using it as the door to his chicken coop. So, of course, David gets it, buys it from him, he restores it, and now it's in a former chicken coop. And last but not least, this is a very famous banner. This was hand-painted by Joe Johnson, the letters, and it's the Ralph McQuarrie artwork in the middle of the Star Killer. And the Star Killer was an early version of Luke Skywalker with a couple of attributes of Obi-Wan and Han Solo in it. But this was used at fan conventions in 1976, a year before Star Wars came out. Lucasfilm really pioneered going to fan conventions for movie companies. And this is something that I followed many years later when I went to Lucasfilm in 1996 and became head of fan relations for 15 years. So this is a banner that ties my career at Lucasfilm with the earliest days of fan relations at Lucasfilm. And we have a picture of Joe Johnson standing next to this, and it was an early logo. Ralph McQuarrie was over at Rancho Obi-Wan and looked at this and remembered painting the original Star Killer and said, "You know, I've always liked that logo the best. I wish they wouldn't have changed it." So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I don't know if I can hear any questions. If you can, yeah, if there are any questions. What's my favorite piece? You're looking at it now. It's the banner. Once again, because it means so much to me personally and because of its history. It'd be the first piece I'd rescue in a fire. The one that got away was a carded Vlix, the Glaslite figure from Brazil. And I already had a Vlix not on a card, And I said, well, I don't know, it sounds expensive. It was $600. Today you couldn't approach that for $6,000. In fact, you can't find a carded licks, period. So it got away. And I regretted that ever since. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you very much.